Purity always begins with disgust, the natural human response to contamination. Revulsion, recoil, the wish to seal away, is older than reason itself. Yet this reflex, though instinctive, can be repurposed. What we reject can instruct. The philosophy of purity, properly understood, does not suppress that impulse, but reclaims it, redirecting aversion away from people and toward process, away from ideology and back to maintenance. The point is not to suppress contamination, but to attend to its meaning. The very thing that repels us, the hair, the droppings, the gnawed wire, is not evidence of moral failure, but of physical neglect. Purity is not about who is unclean, but about what has been left unattended. Nowhere is this clearer than in aviation engineering, where purity is literal, not symbolic. Consider the rodent in the avionics bay, a mismatch of scale so absurd it borders on allegory. A hamster's teeth against an aircraft's circuitry, nature gnawing at the edge of human precision. Avionics, that hidden network of sensors and cables coordinating flight, depends on near-perfect integrity. A frayed wire, a fleck of corrosion, or a trace of moisture can trigger cascading faults across systems calibrated to the millivolt. The aircraft, a paragon of engineered purity, can be undone by the smallest living intruder. The event seems comic until it becomes catastrophic. A short circuit, an autopilot disconnect, an intermittent signal flicker, all can originate from a bite mark invisible to diagnostic software. The animal's act is simple, its consequence disproportionate. The failure here is not moral, it is epistemological. The system was designed for stress, turbulence, and thermal extremes, but not for biology. No sensor detects teeth. No algorithm anticipates fur. So the rodent represents the unmodeled domain, the return of the animate within the inanimate. Its intrusion reveals the blind spot of every sealed design, which is the assumption that isolation equals safety. The lesson here isn't that systems should be more perfectly closed, but rather that closure is always temporary. Purity, if it is to mean anything at all, must acknowledge this permeability and govern it through vigilance, not denial. That shift from denial to vigilance is the core of the purity philosophy. It transforms the instinct of revulsion into an ethic of care. Where ideology says expel the unclean, maintenance says inspect the breach. The same impulse that drives exclusion, once it's rechanneled, actually becomes the engine of attention. The disgust you feel at, say, a rodent nest inside an aircraft, that's not about moral panic, but rather it's a cue for a disciplined response. Clean, seal, recalibrate. What religion and politics often misappropriated as moral purity was, in its original and rightful sense, really just a manual for maintenance. The priest became the engineer, the ritual became the inspection checklist. That kind of reorientation changes everything. Purity stops being about transcendence and instead becomes about survival. The act of cleaning isn't just some aesthetic choice anymore, but a moral necessity grounded in thermodynamics. Systems decay, entropy advances, and neglect just hastens collapse. The rodent, in a way, embodies this truth. It takes advantage of every lapse, every open vent, every forgotten panel. Its intrusion dramatizes the cost of inattention. What we recoil from physically is exactly what we need to address conceptually. The infiltration of life into structure, of contingency into design. The emotion of disgust, when it's redirected, becomes the awareness that systems live right on the edge of failure. And the only real defense we've got is care. This is why engineers, unlike ideologues, never confuse cleanliness with superiority. They clean not to purify themselves, but to preserve function. In their world, dust and droppings are not metaphors, but measurements. A single trace of contamination can ground an aircraft or invalidate a medical procedure. The line between order and disorder is material. Every act of wiping, sealing, or inspecting participates in the same philosophy. The ongoing resistance against entropy that makes civilization work at all. The real practitioners of purity are not the zealots who preach exclusion, but the technicians who keep things fit for purpose. The rodent, then, becomes more than a hazard. It is the teacher. Its presence exposes the fragility of control and the arrogance of assuming separation. It forces a return to the practical definition of purity as readiness, not righteousness. To be pure is to be prepared, not untouched, to maintain boundaries, not to fantasize their permanence. Each act of cleaning becomes a gesture of realism, an acknowledgement that the world is porous and that our systems must breathe within it. The true moral discipline lies in the maintenance itself, not in the myth of perfection. In this light, disgust regains its utility. The proper response to contamination is not condemnation, but correction. The rodent's intrusion does not symbolize evil. It reveals neglect. Its reviled presence can serve as purification in the literal sense, a moment of recognition that brings the system back into attention. To purify, then, is to see what was unseen, to trace the breach, to learn the habits of what one would prefer to deny. The philosophy of purity does not suppress the impulse of negation. It retools it into vigilance. It teaches that rejection, properly guided, is not hatred, but care. Every system, mechanical, biological, social, lives by this principle. The immune system filters without moralizing. The engineer seals without condemning. The cleaner restores without preaching. They all perform the same act, the redirection of aversion into maintenance. Civilization survives not by excluding the unclean, but by cleaning what cannot be excluded. The rodent in the circuit is not an aberration, but a reminder that life will always find its way in, and that purity, to remain pure, must continually make room for that fact. In the end, the true philosophy of purity is not about closing the world, but about keeping it operational. The goal is not to eliminate contamination, but to stay attentive to it, to co-opt the very emotion that once fueled moral exclusion and make it serve material continuity. The system endures not because it remains untouched, but because someone notices when it isn't.